Hi everyone, my name is Lydia and welcome. Today we're going to be painting Winter Mountain Pass. I'll go over the materials that you need to do the painting as well as list those materials down in the description box below. For those of you that have subscribed to my channel, thank you very much. I appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please consider hitting the like button, commenting, and subscribing. Also, if you go to Instagram at Lydia Pangborn Art, you'll see a reference photo of the finished painting. So grab your paints, your brushes, and maybe something to drink to keep you warm, and I'll meet you back at the easel. Today I'm going to be working on a 16 by 20 inch stretched and primed canvas. I'm going to be using acrylic paints, and the colors on my palette are Phthalo Blue, Titanium White, Mars Black, and these three colors will be the main colors of the painting, so that's why I have them up here separated. And down below I've got Phthalo Green and Quinacridone Magenta, which we'll be using a little bit of. The brushes I'm going to be using are a 2-inch flat brush, and this is going to be used to put the main background color on the canvas. I'm also going to be using a filbert brush, and this is an older filbert brush, and this happens to be a number 6. And this is a brush that I don't mind because it's already got a lot of fraying going on, messing up. We're going to use this to put our clouds in and some of the snow. You can also use a brush that's specifically for putting in clouds if you want, but I'm just going to be using this one. I'm going to be using a smaller fan brush, and these are also stiffer bristles. A medium-sized round brush, and this happens to be a number 6 by Artist Loft. I'm also going to be using a palette knife, and this is a longer one, a little more skinny. If you don't have a longer one, you certainly can use any size that you want. This is going to be to put the snow in on our mountains. You're going to want to have a jar of water for rinsing your brushes, something to dry your brushes off with, like a paper towel or an old cloth, something to spritz your canvas with or your paints if things get dry. And I'm also going to be using just a kid's chalk, and I'm going to use blue because most of the background is going to have a bluish color to it, so we'll be able to see this blue, but it won't interfere too much with the colors of the paint. We're going to start by, I'm just going to give my canvas a little spritz of the water, and I'm just going to just sweep my brush across so it's just not a lot of water spots there, and just gave it a little brush. I also did wet the back of my canvas the same way. So I'm going to take my 2-inch flat brush, and it's already got a little dampness in it from the water that I just put up here. And I'm going to grab mostly white with a little touch of blue and black together. I'm just grabbing some of my titanium white and pushing that paint into my brush on each side. And I'm going to come over and get a little touch of blue, and then a lesser bit of my black. So I've got a little touch of blue on one side and a little less of the black. And my goal here is just to cover the painting to get the ground on. So I am going to start working in my quick crisscross strokes, X strokes. And I want this to have a nice winter feel to it, and I want it to be a little more blue at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down and just get a little bit of my blue, and I'm going to run that across the top. And then I'm going to start blending all the way down. And each time I'm just going back up and stroking across the canvas, and with that bit of water that I put on to start with, it helps everything blend a little better. I'm getting all the paint off my brush. And now I've got just about half of my canvas covered. So I'm going to go back into my paint, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm gonna get my brush loaded up really well with the white, pushing the white into the brush. And then I'll pick up some more blue and some more black, just the way I did the last time. And I'm gonna come down just below where I ended and start doing those strokes again. And I'll blend it up to where it starts to blend into what is up above where I stopped. And we're just looking at just getting some coverage on the canvas. I'm going to go back in to my blue now, pick up a little bit more blue. So I'm picking up some white first, then a little drop of the blue, and just a little drop of the black. And I got a little less black this time. So I'm coming down. So I wanted a little bit more blue. And we're gonna have a lot of layers on this canvas, so you don't have to worry if it's not exactly perfect the way that you want it. I'm gonna get a little water on my brush and just start sweeping across, just to blend that a little more. And work the paint off my brush that I have. I'm gonna come back and get a little more white and blue and black, same as I did. I'm gonna loosen this so that I can get the bottom of this really well. There we go. Just wanna make sure that we get a good coverage. Blend that back up in with my little X strokes. And they're just really long crisscross X's. You can get it on any way that you want. You can go up and down if you'd like, but then go back through and make the parallel strokes, because we do want to have this looking like a landscape. So nice. And all that paint off my brush. And I'm pushing really hard into the canvas to get the rest of the paint off the brush. And so what we're going to do now is, once you have this covered the way that you like it, we're going to let this dry. We're going to rinse out our brush, and we'll come back and move on to the next step. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start putting our mountains in. Before you do that, you have to make sure your canvas is dry. You can hit it with a blow dryer or just give yourself some time to make sure it's dry. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have my halfway point is about here. So I'm going to have the base of my mountains up about 1 inch from that halfway point. So I know right along in here is where I'm going to have the base of the mountains and some trees. And I want to have a mountain range over here with a couple of bumps, and then maybe one mountain range on this side. So I'm going to have a mountain that kind of comes in, it kind of, so I'm going to draw a little line up here, maybe along in here, and it's kind of jagged. And I'm going to do the same thing here. And of course we can adjust this as we paint. And this is just to give me an idea. They're going to look like blobs of a pyramid of some sort in the beginning. And then on this side, I'm going to have a little bit of a smaller mountain that may come off the edge there. I may even make this one a little wider through here. And this one a little wider through there. And maybe even come out more there. I'm going to pick up my filbert brush, and I'm going to come into my blue, a little bit of black, and I just got a little black because the black can be very strong. I'm going to start pulling down some of that blue. And so I'm going to pull in some of my white just to see where I am. So I want this more blue. And then I'm going to have maybe just a touch of the red. I don't want too much red back there. And then I'm going to grab a whole bunch of white and lighten it. So I want this color to be darker than my sky color, but we are going to put some clouds in. I'm going to get a little bit more red. And I can test it out and see. And I like how that looks. And I'm just making random strokes. I want to fill this in. I think I'm going to make that come out wider there. And the edges don't have to be straight. We do want them to be a little a bit more craggly. And we're just going to fill this in with this bluish purple color. And my brush is a little damp in this one, just so we can get the coverage that we need. Kind of break up that straight line a little bit. And at the base, I'm going to have my tree, so I'm just going to scrub that out so that it just blends a little bit more down into the foreground. And then I'm going to come over and I'm going to do the same thing. Just getting some blue, a little bit more of that red, and a touch of black. No, wait. Add a little bit more white to that. There we go. This is a smaller mountain here. And this is arranged so, you know, it's going to look more like a couple of mountains once we get the snow on it. Right now it just looks silly and pyramidish, more like a pyramid. And then I'm coming into here, and this one's going to come up. And this one's a little smaller. Maybe I made it a little bit more white in there, so maybe this one appears slightly further in the distance. And as I'm coming down, I'm just going to get that extra paint off my brush. Now what we want to do is we want to decide where we want our path to go. So I want it to disappear back in here and come down. And it can, this one you can have it appear as though it's going straight up, since we are wanting to look as though we have a pathway through the mountain. So if it doesn't have curves in it, it's okay. But what I'm going to do is I do want it to disappear into the background. So it's going to start small on the back, so it's narrower. And then I think I'm going to bring it around. And again, we can adjust as we go. And then I'm going to make it wide through there and come off. Just slightly, so here's my center, so this path is slightly off center. And that's really how I'm thinking about it. So I just know now about where I want it to be, and we can adjust that as we go. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse out my filbert brush, and we'll come back once these mountains dry, and we'll start putting some snow in on the mountains. And to do that, we're going to use our palette knife. So now that our mountains are dry, we're going to go ahead and get some snow on the mountains. And here's where I've got my palette knife now, and I'm going to start to, I like using this palette knife because it gives me some control. I have a light touch on the palette knife, so I'm holding it with my thumb and index finger, and I'm just going to be resting my other fingers down, and I'll be doing some scraping down with it flat. Maybe I'll come along and turn it and make a bigger band of snow going down, and we'll just see organically what unfolds. And I can certainly go back in and add darker colors back in if I need to. So let's just start. I'm going to pull some of the paint down, so I'm getting some of my white on the edge of my palette knife. So I've just got most of it on the edge there, and I'm just going to start by coming in here, and I'm resting my fingers are above where my handle is, and so they'll be resting down, so it's going to be a light touch. I'm just going to come in and just see what happens if I just start pulling one way or the other. And you can decide if you want to, you can sketch in where you think you may want some snow and go from there. And we will be putting some clouds in, so if you go outside of the mountain, it's okay. It's easy to adjust once we put our clouds in. And I feel like it's really thick through here, so I'm just going to scrape through a little bit and move some of that over this way, and just keep scraping down getting some of that paint. And the canvas has a texture to it, so it grabs onto the paint and creates that illusion that there's some thicker snow maybe at the top, and then it gets thinner down at the bottom. And then from there I can look at it and decide where I want some more to go. So I'm going to pick some of that paint up on the tip, and this way you have control of where you're putting your paint. And maybe I'll just put some in there a little, and a little bit more up in here. On that really high peak. And maybe I'll pull a little bit of what that's left down here. And maybe some on this little edge. Maybe I'm pulling it across and then down. So you get to decide where you want to put your snow. This is your painting. I'm going to put a little bit up in here. And just maybe scrape some of that down. And we're going to have some trees down in the lower area here. So if you want to put a little snow down in here, you can. So, because we may see a little bit of it, but it doesn't have to have a whole bunch down in through here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my knife this way and start sweeping down. So I'm going to get some paint on this edge that's on the outer edge that's on this side, and I'm going to come down, pop it up, and then I'm just making a little wiggling motion, and then I can start to work that down, scraping through that as well. And then I'll come back and I'll get some back on the tip, and maybe bring that along in here. Gives me the illusion that there's a little bit of another little mountain there, and then here. And you can hear the scrape across the canvas as you're pulling it down. Come up in here. And it's always good after you get some of this on to take a step away from your painting so you're not so close to it, and just see how it's looking. Maybe where you might want to add a little bit of some thick snow. I'm going to break this little line up here just a little bit. Maybe bring some of this over on the side. So you can work this until you get it the way that you like it. And then I'm going to come over on this side and do the same thing. And just remember, you want to have some areas that may have thicker snow and some that has thinner snow. You get to create this how you like it. And again, it's always good to take a step back and take a step away, take a step back and see what it looks like at a distance. So once you have your mountains the way you like them, we're going to take some time to let them dry. And as they're drying, we're going to work on doing some clouds. So we're going to rinse off our palette knife, put that away, and we're going to come back in with our filbert brush. So we'll need this brush when we come back. Here's where we're going to start to get our clouds in, and I have the paint on my mountains it's very dry, and this is going to give a nice cloudy, hazy effect in the sky, and I'm using my filbert brush to do that. And this brush is quite dry. There's a really, really light bit of water in it, but not much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and just pick up a little bit of the paint, and I'm going to put it on both sides, just on the tip of my brush, just like this. And when you go in to put your brush down, you're going to press into the canvas and just leave it alone. So what I mean by that is, so I'm going to leave this upper area a little bit more blue, the blue that I put up there, and I'm just going to take my brush, it's quite dry, with that little bit of paint on it, and I'm pushing it fully into the canvas, and it's going to leave an imprint of what looks like the top of a cloud. And then I'm just going to start to make little round motions. So you can see where it left what looks like some thicker white paint that gives you the idea there's a top of a cloud. And I'm staying on that same side of the brush. And I'm going to continue to make those circular motions as I move down away from the very top of that cloud. And it helps to blend the white around so it gives a nice cloudy, hazy effect. So now I want to decide, do I want to add more here? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to come below where this very bright spot is, and I've turned my brush around because I put paint on both sides of the brush. I'm pushing in and I'm making those same circular motions. And I can even go into the mountain a little bit once I get a lot of the paint off the brush. So it's easier to learn to do this just by using a little bit of paint on the tip of the brush at a time. And that way you can take your time and make your decisions. So I'm going to come in again. So each time I'm just going to load up, and this is why it's good to have a brush that you don't mind getting a little bit of more damage to. So I've loaded it up, and I'm going to come in. I'm going to come over here this time. I may come back to over there, but I want my darker clouds to be up higher, or the brighter clouds, the brightest white, to be up in the top. And I can take some of that and just blend it in. And again, this is why I want my mountains to be dry, because that way I can come in and just create this haziness between the mountains much easier, and even onto the mountains if I want to. So I have that hazy, snowy effect. So now I'm going to flip my brush over because I still have paint left. I'm going to come right here and just create a little bit more of a cloud. And make sure to blend it out at the bottom. Now I'm looking over here, and I want this to be more hazy, so I'm going to work, once I got some of that paint off my brush, I can work some of that down into here and up above this mountain to create that haziness that I really like. And maybe down into this area here where there's a little bit of a crack there, maybe a little haziness there. And anywhere you think you may want a little bit of that nice hazy look, you can go all over your mountain if you want to create a nice snowy effect. So I'm going to keep moving across, and I'm going to come back each time and get paint on the tip of the brush. And I'm going to put it down, push in, and just start making really tight little circular motions. And I am working from the top down. So here, a little bit more of a blended look. A little bit on this side here, just above. And then go ahead and make it pretty hazy down in through in between here, between the mountains there, and a little bit more here. And this is why it's important to have everything dry before you start working with this technique. Just a little bit more cloud cover here. And maybe a few little dots that are small down in through here, because this will give the illusion that things are receding into the distance because they're getting smaller. And I'm just going to go ahead and take a little bit of this and just haze it in down at the base of my mountain. And of course we're going to have some trees through here. And I'm going to go ahead while I have this brush and I've done my clouds. So you can always take a moment to step back, look at it, see what it looks like for you when you step away from it. And I'm liking how that looks. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use this brush since I have it in my hand, and I'm going to take some of this color that I've got, the blue, my white, a hint of the red, so a little Quinacridone magenta, and a little bit of my black, mixing those together. Bring some white over to see what that looks like, because it gives me this bluish, slightly purple. Get a little bit more red in there. And I'm going to come in and just start to scumble in this color. And I'm still going to leave some of the color of my original ground color underneath, but I'm just going to start to work this in. And I can get a little water on my brush for this, but I still want it to be fairly dry, mostly dry. You can hear it making that scraping sound across the canvas. And I'm going to have a little bit of little rocks down in the foreground down in here. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that as well in just a minute. Put a little bit of water on my brush so I can bring a little bit more of this color in here. And this is the beginning of getting some snow, the very beginning of our snow. And I'm going to come in and I'm going to pull out some of this black and blue, and this is going to be quite dark. and a little tiny touch of the red. And this time I'm gonna have my paint a little bit more damp because I do want to come in and just get the beginning of what looks like a few rock formations down here in the foreground. And I want it to be pretty dark. I added a little bit more blue to that. These could be little craggly little pieces of rock as well. Maybe a little smaller one right here, coming in toward our path. And then while I have the same color of my rocks, I'm gonna pull in a little bit more blue and a little bit more white. I want it to be a little darker than this. This is gonna be the pathway, so not quite as vibrant. And I'm gonna start to work in what looks like maybe that little pathway disappearing, and I'm gonna make it a little narrower in the back and start widening it out. So it's kind of a grayish blue color. So blue, black, white. And just kind of work that in. So I'm gonna, and make sure that when you do this, that you keep your strokes parallel to the top and the bottom so they're horizontal. And we'll be working a little bit more. And I'm gonna do this mostly toward the middle of the path, just to give this idea as we move front, because we'll be adding our snow in. So we're gonna give our little filbert brush a break. And we're gonna give everything a moment to dry. Now we have our mountains and our clouds in. We put the beginning parts of our snow in. I'm gonna go ahead and start to put in some trees in the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna mix up, I want green and red. So it's green, but I'm gonna take that green back with some of the red. And I'm gonna pull in just a little bit of my blue. And because I don't want this to be too dark, I'm gonna pull in some of my white. And I want to pull in a little bit more blue. I'm just gonna, I won't need too much of this color, just a touch of red. So it becomes a green, purple, gray color. So I want a little bit more white in there. So these are going to be just little indications of bushes or trees way in the background. So I do want a hint of the green, but I still want it to be, since it's set back a little bit more muted in the color. So there we go. Green and red with a little blue and quite a bit of white. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my small fan brush, and it's going to be damp, and I'm just going to pull some of that into the very tips of my bristles here. Get it very covered, so I've got quite a bit of paint on the bristles. And I'm going to create, just turning the brush, if it's up tall, it may look like a taller tree. If it's down a bit more on the flat, so that the whole tip of the brush is tapping down, it may be more of a bush. But you can make it the way that you want it. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a taller line of trees that have some good negative space, so tall, short, tall, short. But as I get closer to my path, I'm gonna make them shorter so that they look like they are receding with my path into the background. So let's just start over here, and we're just gonna tap in. And we will be putting some snow, what looks like snow here. So some of these may be shorter, and some may be taller, and they're not going to be standout. They're just going to be in the background. And once these dry, we'll tap some little white pieces on them. And just making sure that I have some paint that has a little dampness to it, And I'm going to press in, just get some of that paint on the brush. And right in through here, I'm going to have it just a little shorter, for the most part, down in this little area that's disappearing into the distance. We're not painting in trees, we're just giving the illusion that maybe there's some trees back here, some bushes, some sort of growth that's green, because we're at such a high elevation that we still have some green, but maybe not anything that's brightly colored that's going to survive back here right now because it's so cold and so snowy. And I'm just going to lightly run my brush along the base of these to give them the illusion that they're setting in there. So while the bush is back here, the bush tree area line back here is drying, we're going to go ahead and take our filbert brush again, and we're going to start to scumble in some of our snow. And it's going to be a very similar concept to how we did the sky. And we want to remember to leave, like we did up in here, we left some dark spaces. We're not filling everything in. We've got this lighter color we put in for our ground. We've got the darker color that we put in when we put our mountains in, so that we just have a variation. We have what looks like a footpath where maybe people are walking here, so we're going to make that look like it blends into the snow, and we'll have some snowy areas on our rock formation down here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the same thing I did with the clouds. I'm just putting paint on each little top tip of the brush, and back here I'm going to pick up just a hint of the blue on each side of my brush. And I'm going to start back here just putting in some good little areas. So I put the brush down and I'm just going to start to move it around where I think I may want some snow. And I put the blue in there because in the distance it's not going to be as vibrant as when we move forward, but there may be a few places that are vibrant. And I may thin it out, not take away all of those blue areas that I put down that are darker, but it's under there and you still know it's there. So again, I'm going to come back and I'm putting paint on each side of the brush. I'm going to get a little hint of blue on each side, so I can come and do the same thing on this side, so that there's a faint blue with that. It's a cold day, so I'm going to sweep some of this. Once my brush gets a little more empty, I'm going to sweep some of that across the pathway back there. We know that the pathway is there, but it is fading. I'm going to come back in. I just picked up a little bit more paint so I can get a little bit more of that windswept, snowy look across my path. All right, so as I move forward, I'm still going to have some of the little bits of blue mixed into my paint up to maybe about this point here. And then as I come forward, I'm going to start to make it more and more white. And I want to create a little area that looks like a little snowdrift on this side. And we'll put some snow up on our rocks. So I'm going to come in and I'm dipping the tips of the brush into the paint. And I'm going to start right along here. Let me get some of my blue. I want a little bit of the blue still. Don't forget to do that like I almost did. And I'm going to leave, so that darker blue, bluish purple color that I put in has that hint of red in it. I'm going to leave some of this back here so it looks like maybe there's more rocky areas like these rocks, like this big bank of rocks we're going to have toward the front. And that's the illusion that I'm working to create. I'm still going to pick up just a little bit of blue through here. And I'm gonna start to curve my stroke down into this pathway. So it looks like maybe there's an embankment there. And I'm gonna do tip of the brush and then my blue. And come back in here. And I'm just continuing to come back in, just like I did with the clouds each time. I'm just picking up a little bit more of that blue. Now, as I start to move more forward, I'm going to pick up mostly white. I'm just going to go ahead and pick up quite a bit of white and no more blue unless there's any just kind of left in my brush. And I'm going to create this little embankment area with the snow maybe coming down into the path, and we'll work on that in just a minute. Getting that. So when you're scraping across your path, make sure that you're scraping, again, parallel to the tops and bottoms of your painting. And it's always good to take a moment to step back, see where you are with it. And a little bit more snow back through here. And if you feel that something looks too harsh, like this looks a little bit more like a harsh line there, you can always get a little bit of water on your brush and just start blending that out a little bit as you go. So I got a little water on my brush just so I can get that harsh line out, and the same over here. Or you can come back in and get some more of your dark color. So you can come back in and pick up a little bit more of your blue, maybe a little red in that, and some white. Or it's a little bit more blue. Maybe you want to add a few little darker areas back in. You can do that as well. So there's no wrong way to do that. I may even come and add some of that down in through here on the path. Since it's a little less harsh than the black down there. And I'm still making this little C curve right here because I'm giving the illusion that it's a little bit of an embankment. So now I'm going to come back into my white, and if I have anything left on the brush, it's okay. Any other color that's left. And then I can keep going with my snow along my little pathway here. And as the paint thins out on my brush, I'm still sweeping it across the pathway. I want more snow to kind of drift down right in through here. Pick up a little bit more of the blue and the red mix. I'm going to come back in through here. Sweep across here. Get some more white. I'm just still working on just filling in just dark areas, light areas where I think there may be some, as I'm working on my snow. This is takes a little bit of time to get all the snow, and especially when you're just trying to work, figure out maybe how you may want it to look. I want to create a little bit of an embankment on this side as well. So I'm going to start making it curve, make little curve strokes over here. Up a little hint of blue to put it along here, so it'll make a little curve there, so it'll give that illusion. Then I'm going to come back in and I want to go ahead and get blue, a little bit of black here, and quite a bit of white, because I want this to be more blue than black, and this time hint of red. I'm just gonna put this a little bit into my path. Then I'm gonna get some water on my brush and get most of that paint off, just so I can blend this in a little bit before I do any more white over it. I'm gonna let that dry. This is my little pathway. I'm gonna be going off in that direction. Came in and picked up some white. I'm just going to blend that in a little bit more. So I've got a little water, a little white, and just blend that in. And we'll bring some of that snow down in just a little bit. I'm going to use a different brush to get some more defined snow strokes in just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this same color that I have here and start to, it's that bluish black color, and just start to hit that in on these rocks a little bit as well. Maybe even another small little rock right here. Okay, so we're gonna let all that dry. This, of course, is not the final say on all of our snow or our pathway, but I'm gonna go back in. We're gonna rinse this brush out for now, and we'll come back with our small fan brush. So I'm gonna take my fan brush, and I'm taking some white, and I'm taking that white back into the color that I used to do these background trees, so that blue and green mixture, which was mostly green with some white. I'm adding a little bit more white to it, and I'm gonna come back in and I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm just gonna tap in. So we're just adding what may look like some lighter snow pieces, and then we'll come back in and we'll definitely get some of that white in there as well, just the highlight of the white. And we're not gonna see a lot of this, it's just gonna be back there, and we'll see some of it, but not all of it. And I'm going to tap in small through there. And then I'm going to keep this color on my brush. I'm not going to rinse it out, and I'm going to pull from the outer edge of my white because I really want quite a bit of the white now. And I'm going to lightly tap in some of the white areas. Just a little bit. I don't want these everywhere, but like the snow maybe captured some of the, and you don't want too much paint on the brush, but the trees caught some of the little snow and little spots. And I'm especially going to put some back in through here so our eye will go back to these little trees that are disappearing in the distance. And I'm doing the same thing as I did before. Sometimes my brush is on the very tip, sometimes it's turned sideways. A little bit more white. I'm just going to run this along the bottom edge in some places. And then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to pull into the white some more. And here's where I can start to refine my snowbank. So once I've done my trees back here, I'm going to work to take some of that white paint with my fan brush and just dip into the pure white paint here. And I'm just pressing my fan brush into some of this white paint. And then I can start to see where I might want some more brighter areas of snow that may be drifting about. And this brush can be a little bit damp, so because you're just making these little curved strokes, putting some little extra pieces of snow maybe drifting into the pathway a little more. And the same thing on this side. And this isn't so much a scumbling as I'm just like almost writing on the canvas, making some decisions about where there may be some snow piled up, some snow going into my path. And I may even take this and sweep it across the path a little bit. Just to make sure that I blend the edge of the path in to make it look like it all belongs. Maybe if there's any areas that look a little too much like a straight line, this will be a nice time to work that in as well, to create more of an effect of snow just drifting everywhere. Maybe even back along the line of trees we just did. All right, so we're going to give all of that a break, and then we're going to think about what it is we may want to add. So I know we need some snow down and onto our rock formation down here and make it look more like a rock. And then we're going to put one tree in. I think we're going to put one little pine tree that's really nice and vibrant and pretty right here. So we're going to let everything take a moment to dry, and we'll come back and we'll do that. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a tree in the foreground, and I'm going to use my medium round brush And this is going to be very similar to the way that we did the Merry Magical Trip, the last video that I did with the trees and the Santa Claus in it. And I'm going to have this tree maybe come up to start right above this back tree line and come down maybe partially off the canvas here. So it'll make a little triangle and down. So I'm going to use, I did mix up some colors, so I'm going to use mostly green, some blue, and a touch of my red to darken my green. And I'm going to see what that looks like. So if I were to add some white to it. All right, so that's about where we are if we added white to it. So I'm going to, I like that, so I'm going to go back and make it a little dark again. And so I'm just going to start making, let's see, I think I'm going to start it here and bring it on down this way. So I'm just going to start by making diagonal strokes to create the tree. So just diagonal strokes with my round brush. Bring it to a point. And maybe bring it so it's coming a little bit more off the canvas here, a little wider there. And this is just going to give me the idea of where that tree is. Get a little bit more water in my paint and on my brush. Make it a little bit fatter on this side. There we go. Make it a little broader. And I'm just, wherever I'm stroking, I'm starting with my point away from what would be the center of the tree. So coming in from this side, I'm pulling away, and coming in from this side, I'm pulling away into the center. And I do want some of my branches to look as though they're coming toward the viewer. So, and we'll be adding a bit more layers on this so you can see. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add white to that to make it a little lighter in color. Just rolling my point into that to stir it up a little bit. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to stay away from the center and just start to hit some of this lighter color on the outer edges of the tree and bringing it in just a little bit to the center. I want to keep some of that darkness in the center and some of the that dark color we just put on also random throughout the tree. I'm just going to take some of that and put it down under here for a little shadowy area. All right, so then what I'm going to do is I'm not going to rinse my brush. I'm going to come back into my blue over here and just roll my paint brush into that blue. So whatever I have left, I'm putting it into the blue, and I'm going to bring that back into this center a little bit more, just only in the center. And I may have some of the strokes of the tree facing upwards so that it looks like it may be some fullness facing toward the viewer, and I'll work that into some of this paint that's already there. And I'm not going to put this everywhere, but I am going to make it more toward the center. I'm going to come back into my lighter green, roll that paint in, and just work some of that light color back in there. And then we're going to let that dry before we put any more highlights on it. I'm going to take what's on my brush though And I'm going to come down here to my little rock formations, and I'm just going to start to work some of this bluish green color down into my rock area before we start to finish that out. So I'm just giving little random strokes. And then I can take what's left on my brush and come up in here. There we go. So I'm gonna, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my blue and my purple, or my blue and my red to make a little bit of a purple color. And then I'm gonna pop that in there as well, right in the center. Give it just a few minutes to dry. And I can put some of those dark colors outside of the center, but not a lot outside of the center. And then I'm going to come back and take some of that color and put it down here in my rock formation. And the rocks will make sense after we get some highlights on them. Okay, I'm liking that. I'm going to do a little bit of my white now without rinsing my brush. And I'm going to start to put some of that white just in random places on my rock. Mostly on the top, because I want it to look like it's lighter and maybe some of the snow is resting in places on my little rock formation. And this is just given the suggestion, the illusion of snow on the rocks. Very similar to the mountains in the background, just a mix of darks and lights. And maybe this area here is flatter and it curves out a little more. And we don't have a lot of a light source in this painting because it is a winter day, but there's sneaky bits in there. So if you think about your red mixed in here with the blues, it kind of gives that purple, and that there's a little bit of what may be considered somewhat of some warmth snuck in there. And I'm gonna put that there. I'm gonna get back in. I'm gonna get some of the darker blue down there. I'm gonna put some of that purple in random places here that I created. Yeah, I like that a lot. There we go. And I'm gonna come back to my white. So I just took a little bit of the red and the blue and put it down here, and I'm gonna come back with what's on my brush and then come in here and get some of the little bits and pieces of white, maybe especially up here and maybe there, and then right up in here. You can take some of this and sneak it into the path a little bit, just a little bit in the back there, maybe along in here. And we're going to come back in and settle that tree in a little more. So I'm going to just put a little light rock formation back here. So I'm going to take some of this blue mixed with a tad bit of red. And it's mostly blue and white. I think I'm going to put another little rock formation back here. I think it's going to have to be a little bit more noticeable than that. So let's see. I just want it to be just a rock formation there. And I just mixed up a little red and blue right there, maybe up in there. Then I'll take some of that white and just dot on top of that. So maybe that is a little rock formation there, and we'll come back and put a heavier highlight on it in just a little bit. And so the reason I did that is because I want your eye to go from here to the tree and back to the back pathway. And when I do some white highlights, I'm gonna put a little bit more white back through here. I'll hit a little white highlight on top of this. Maybe even this is some rock formations right in here. And then I'll have white highlights on bits of the tree, and then our white little somewhat of some white highlights here. So I'm liking the way it looks. I'm gonna let this dry and we'll come back and we'll do those last little steps. So I'm gonna start with what I want to do from the back forward. So I'm gonna start with my small fan brush, and I am going to just pick up just some white on the tip of my brush. So I'm just pulling into the white. And I want to put a little bit more white right on these little trees back here. So I'm just tapping in just a little bit to brighten it right where that pathway ends back there, where you think it ends, so that your eye goes back there. And then what I'm going to do is, while I have this on this white on my brush here, I'm just going to brighten up some of these little snowy areas that are more forward. More white here. There we go. And I'm gonna keep some of the dark underneath that tree, but just brighten some of the areas that are forward of it and curve that down. Get a little water on my brush and just kind of brush that down like that. All right, I'm liking that until we get some more highlights on the tree there. And I'm liking all that. So now I'm going to put this brush away, and I'm going to go back to my round brush, and I am going to have my white, and I'm going to pull in just a little bit of my blue. So do you remember how we put some of the snow back here in these areas, but it had that little touch of blue when we were doing it? So I'm just going to use my round brush now, and I just want a little bit of paint on it with a little bit of that blue. And I'm just going to brush some of that just a little bit on the top of this formation here, and maybe even settle it down by putting a little bit there. Just a little bit more white to that. And I'm just barely touching it just to give a little bit of the idea that there's snow maybe on top of these rock formations back here. Just touching it very little. And I'm actually going to put a little bit of snow just with white. I'm just going to add just a little bit of that around the base of the rock formation and coming back toward my tree, just a little. Settle that in a little bit. Just a little bit more white through here. There we go. Just a little. Sometimes just the smallest of strokes makes a difference there. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this same round brush, I'm going to get a little more wet, and I'm going to do my white for the highlights on my tree as well, but I'm going to add just a touch of my Quinacridone magenta. I'm just going to stir that in. I want it more white than anything, and this is the only bit of warmth to the tree. So I'll add a little blue to that. There we go, so it becomes more purple, so it's not too warm with that red in there. Let's see how this looks. And I'm just gonna pop that in really little bits around the tree. I want it to be a little bit more bluish than that though. You can have it pink or blue or whatever color you want. I will be putting a little bit more white in there. And these are just very tiny little strokes that are just a little bit of pieces to make this tree stand out. And I don't want too many of them, just a little bit. And I may even pop some of that on top of these rocks here. So there's the top of that rock, and this one just kind of angles in here, a little bit there, and that one angles in there. I'll even pop a little bit of that back there, maybe a little back here, just to draw the eye back a little bit. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig into my blue and red, so that purple color. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that down in here because I want to settle this in a little bit more. Maybe even bring it out to there a little bit. And I'll get a little bit of snow piled up under there in just a minute when we do the white. So I'm liking all of that. So I'm going to get the paint out of this brush. And I want to get it all out because I'm going to be doing some white highlights. So now once I get all the paint out of my brush, I'm going to do just white highlights now. So these are pure white. So I've got some white on my brush. I'm going to bring it over here out of the way of everything. I just have it on the tip of my round brush. And I'm going to decide where else do I want. So this is just going to be a little hit in some places. So maybe some snow on my rock formation here. So it's right where I put some of that pink, but I don't have to cover it all up. And maybe some right through here. Flatten that out and bring that down. Flatten that out and bring that down. And that's at an angle. There's some there. All right, and then I'm going to start to do the same thing, picking up a little bit more paint. I'm actually going to put a little bit down through here. There we go. Pour that out with my finger. Put maybe a drop back here. Some of that snow is accumulating around this little rocky area back here. I'm going to have a little tiny bit of paint on my brush just to refine this back area just a little bit with that white, not too much back here. And then I'm going to start to pull in some of that white into my tree. Just a little bit, just like I did with the pink. Just going to hit some areas with the white where I think they may be snowy looking. And then come in here and just scum away with that blue. A little bit more white down in here. Maybe a little bit coming in the center, not too much. Maybe a little bit facing toward us. Pile up a little bit more snow right around it here. There we go. Too much of that. There we go. I'm just going to add a few more little dark areas in the middle here. Maybe a little bit. This is purple and blue, just going in and hitting some of the darks in certain spots. Blue. There we go. Bring that out a little bit more there. And one last little thing is I'm going to get a little bit of this white in my small fan brush. Just want to brush up as though this is piling up around this tree, but not to cover up the shadow of the tree. Just some snow just kind of piled up where this tree is. And then some snow piled up here, just to bring the eye back here just a little bit. And just a little snow piled up here. So you can put your little snow piled up wherever you want it. So I'm liking the way it looks, so I'm going to go ahead and decide where I want to sign it. I've got my little liner brush, and I've got some green, some very light green paint here. I'll roll my liner brush in the green paint, get it a little watery, a little inky here. Get that to a point. See if I can do this in one quick swoop here. All right, there we go, we're done. Thank you for keeping me company today, and I hope you created something special for yourself and had fun doing it. Until next time, bye-bye.